Chapter 7. I laid down in bed and looked at my lamp. It was so silent, I could hear my brother and father conversating in the room down the hall. Henry was talking to our dad about everything that happened to us today. It was a lot. We got kidnapped, discovered a dead family, and I might have witnessed someone die. All of it was just replaying in my mind over and over. The fact that I wasn't paying too much attention to the conversation happening made it seem like ghosts were chanting the images into my head. I felt like I was being hypnotized since the thoughts were so vivid, and my eyes were focused on the lamp. Because of this, I almost didn't respond when I heard my dad call my name. I got out of bed and went to my dad's room. He was sitting on his bed, and Henry was sitting in a chair. "How are you feeling, son?" our dad asked me. "I'm feeling okay," I responded, "just a little shooken up." "That's understandable. I think we should all sleep in this room tonight. What do you two think?" "That sounds good," Henry answered. I nodded my head in agreement. Our dad grabbed some sheets and laid on the floor. Henry did the same, which left the bed for me to sleep on. I only slept for a few hours, waking up just before the sun rose. I didn't get a chance to fall right back to sleep because I heard a knock at the door as soon as I opened my eyes. Who would be knocking this early? I thought to myself. My family was still asleep, so I quietly got out of bed. I heard the knock again. I briefly debated if I should ignore the knock. If I were alone, I definitely would have stayed in bed and went under the covers, but being with my family made me feel safe. I went downstairs, stretching and yawning, before I looked out the front window. To my surprise, nobody was there at the door. My phone started ringing, and I picked it up right away. "Hello?" I said. Nobody responded. After a few seconds, the phone call ended, and once it did, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was louder and more aggressive. I hesitated to look out the window, because it startled me. But when I did finally look out the window, it was only Richard. I only slept for a few hours, waking up just before the sun rose. I didn't get a chance to fall right back to sleep, because I heard a knock at the door as soon as I opened my eyes. Who would be knocking this early? I thought to myself. My family was still asleep, so I quietly got out of bed. I heard the knock again. I briefly debated if I should ignore the knock. If I were alone, I definitely would have stayed in bed and went under the covers, but being with my family made me feel safe. I went downstairs, stretching and yawning before I looked out the front window. To my surprise, nobody was there at the door. My phone started ringing, and I picked it up right away. "Hello?" I said. Nobody responded. After a few seconds, the phone call ended, and once it did, there was another knock at the door. This time it was louder and more aggressive. I hesitated to look out the window because it startled me, but when I did finally look out the window, it was only Richard. "Did you just call me?" I asked when I opened the door. "Yes," Richard answered. "I wanted to know if you were awake before I knocked." "But didn't you knock before you called?" "No." "Oh, I thought I heard a knock before." "Well, if you did, it wasn't me. But can I come in?" "Of course." I stepped aside so he could walk inside.
"Why are you here so early in the morning?" I asked Richard as I closed the door. "Just checking on you and Henry," he responded. "I heard you found the foreman's bodies." "Whose bodies?" "The foreman's. That's the family that lived in House 49. "Oh, I guess I never really knew their last name. I only just recently heard Jamal say it, but I guess I forgot. I wonder why the mayor didn't address them by the last name." Me too. But I know them because I live close by, so I talk to them sometimes. I know. You live in house 70. Yeah. But anyways, I heard they were in the basement. Pretty spooky, huh? Of course it was. That's why I got out of there. He chuckled. I didn't want to see something like that. But where is Henry? Upstairs sleeping. Did you forget what time it is? No, but I guess I'll head out now. I'll be back later. Right before he walked out, Henry came downstairs. Hey, Richard, Henry said. Richard waved at him. What are you doing up so early? I just came by to check on you and Thomas, Richard responded. That's nice of you. We're both doing okay. Just a little disturbed from what we saw yesterday. Good to hear. Yesterday was pretty crazy. I'm glad we all still feel okay after everything that happened. Richard walked away from the door and sat on the couch as Henry walked into the kitchen for a few seconds, just to get a glass of water. I sat next to Richard and Henry did too. Richard then turned on the TV and started clicking through channels. He did this for 5 minutes without watching any show for more than 10 seconds. He finally stopped on some random cartoon, but only watched it for 1 minute before he started changing channels again. Are you ever actually going to watch something? Henry asked. Yes, Richard responded. As soon as something interesting comes on. He continued looking for a channel to watch for a few more seconds. Then the news channel came on. The mayor was talking to Hector and Charlie about discovering the foreman's bodies. And for some reason, that seemed to bother Richard. We were there too, Richard said as he stood up. Why does that matter? I asked. He's the detective, and it's not like you're the one who discovered the bodies. Well, I was still there when they started investigating, too. Richard ran out the door. Should we follow him? I asked Henry. I guess so, Henry replied. Maybe it is important for us to speak on our experience with the investigation. I mean, we were with Hector when he found the body. I guess that makes us witnesses of some sort. I guess you're right. Henry and I got up from the couch and walked outside. Henry and I looked around for Richard, but we did not see him. How does he disappear so quickly? Henry asked. I'm not sure, I replied. But look over there. I pointed at the end of the street to Suzanne and Elizabeth, who were walking away from our position. They were walking with another girl. Henry and I decided to catch up with them. Hey, Suzanne, I said as we approached them. Suzanne turned around, smiled, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Hey, Thomas, she said back. Where are you girls heading? Henry asked. We were just walking around, Elizabeth answered. That's nice, I said. I turned to the girl who was walking with Suzanne and Elizabeth. Hey, Suzanne, I said as we approached them. Suzanne turned around, smiled, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Hey, Thomas, she said back. Where are you girls heading? Henry asked. We were just taking a walk around, Elizabeth answered. That's nice, I said. I turned to the girl who was walking with Suzanne and Elizabeth. She had dark skin, short hair, and wore a plain white skirt. She had glasses and she was about the same height as Elizabeth. Who's your friend right there? I asked Suzanne. The girl put her hand out to shake mine. I'm Isabella, she replied. We've actually met before, Thomas. Oh, I chuckled and scratched my head. I kind of forgot. Well, now you remember. She chuckled too. Were you two going for a walk too? Suzanne asked. Nah, Henry responded. We were going to talk to Hector and the mayor. Okay, have fun. I'll see you later, Thomas. Suzanne gave me another kiss on the cheek, while Elizabeth waved at Henry. Then the three of them walked away.
Henry and I arrived at the broadcast station not too long after speaking with the girls. It did not seem like the studio had stopped filming from when we saw the news on TV earlier. Hector was now offset talking to Richard, but the mayor was still giving a speech in front of the cameras. We walked around the set to get to Richard and Hector. Richard, Henry said to get his attention. Richard and Hector stopped speaking and looked towards us. Why do you keep running off? He then asked. I just really want to help, he answered. There's finally something going on in this town, and I don't want to miss anything. I guess that makes sense. I want to help too, I said. You can all help, Hector replied. Sounds good to me, Henry responded. That makes us a team of detectives, Richard stated as he took out a magnifying glass and briefly looked around. We will be known as the Four Finders. Get it? There's four of us. Henry, Hector, and I looked at each other in silence. Well, unless you count Charlie, but I kinda see him and Hector counting as one unit. That reminds me, I need to go back to my house to check something. Richard ran out of the building.
Why does Richard always leave out of nowhere? Henry asked me. Hasn't he always been doing that? I asked back. Yeah, but it seems like he has been doing it a lot more recently. Is that so? Hector asked. Because if he's been showing weird behaviors, he might have something to do with the murders. Richard? Why would you think he is involved? Henry looked dismayed from Hector's accusation. Yesterday, he went inside the house to move things around before I could investigate, and he left just before we went downstairs where the bodies were. Plus, you just said he was acting different in some way. That makes me more suspicious of him. I understood why Hector was suspicious of Richard for those reasons. I would be too if I didn't already know him. Well, Henry started saying, I could never believe that Richard or anyone else in this town would be involved in something like that. Yeah, I said, agreeing with him. Besides, the day before we heard something happen to the Foremans, Richard was with me and Henry all day. Hector shrugged. He could still be involved with it in some way.
Charlie came into the room but didn't say anything. He sat down in a chair with his hand on his chin. What you thinking about, buddy? Hector asked Charlie. Oh, nothing, he replied. What are those two doing here? Oh, they just want to help us on our investigation. Wouldn't it be better if we got the police to help us? Maybe, but we usually handle cases on our own, so any extra people helping would be the same amount of help in my eyes. People helping would be the same amount of help in my eyes. Hector looked towards me and Henry. Why don't you guys look through this flash drive that has the recording of us finding the bodies, and see if you can find something Charlie and I overlooked. He took the flash drive out of his pocket and threw it over to me. Charlie and I are gonna go ask around town to see if anyone knows something about the murder. They both walked out of the room. Should we just watch it here? Henry asked. There's a computer right over there. He pointed to the corner where the computer was. I don't see why not, I responded. We walked over to the computer, which was already on, and put the flash drive in. The first thing I noticed when I opened the file was a folder with Richard's name on it. I ignored it and clicked on the recording of us finding the dead bodies. The video took a few seconds to load, and when it did, it started off blurry. Once the visuals became clear, we watched the video very closely. It was like watching a horror movie, and I had shivers down my spine, even though there wasn't anything too frightening in the video. At least that's what I thought. I didn't notice anything strange when we watched it because I was paying too much attention to the part of the video that recorded the area I thought I saw someone standing in. It was Henry who pointed out something we did not see when we walked through the basement yesterday. There was a faint shadow on the floor that was outlined as a person. It was there for 4 seconds before disappearing. "What the hell?" I said quietly, before asking Henry to replay the video. This time while watching it, we focused on any moments where the camera viewed the basement windows. Every time it did, nothing seemed to be there except once. Halfway through the video, the camera zoomed past the window. We paused on that moment and saw someone clearly standing there. It was such a blur that we couldn't figure out any features of the person.
"Who was that standing there?" Henry asked. His voice was shaky. "I don't know," I responded. "You think maybe it could have been the killer watching us?" Henry froze for a few seconds before answering. "No," he said, seemingly because he just didn't want to believe it was the killer. But I could tell he thought it was highly possible.
"Maybe it was just Richard," I suggested to make both of us feel less intimidated. "Yeah, maybe we should ask him." "Alright, but we also gotta show Hector what we saw too." We logged off the computer, grabbed the flash drive, and left.